Once there was a woodcutter with two children and their stepmother. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's name was Gretel. They lived so poorly that sometimes there was not even anything to eat. And then one evening he lay in bed, pondering how to feed the children further. His wife advised him to have children in the forest, light a fire, give a piece of bread each and leave them there, not all four of them die of hunger. But the woodcutter did not agree. And until then, his wife persuaded him that he finally agreed. And the children, because of hunger, also could not sleep and heard everything that their stepmother said to their father. And when the parents fell asleep, Hansel secretly rushed out of the house. The moon was shining brightly, and the white stones glittered like coins. Hansel pocketed as many of them as he could fit. Then he returned home and the children went to bed. In the morning, the stepmother came to the children, gave each of them a piece of bread, and they all went to the forest together. On the way, Hansel threw out white stones one by one. When they arrived at the clearing, my father began to light a fire. He ordered the children to sit near the fire and make sure that it didn't go out, while they and their stepmother would go for more firewood. They sat, tired, and fell fast asleep. When the children woke up, it was a dark night all around. And when a full month had risen in the sky, Hansel took his sister by the hand and went, looking for the way through the pebbles, which glittered like new coins, and showed them the way. They walked all night long, and at dawn they came to their father's house. Some time passed. And the children again heard how the stepmother one night began to beg their father to get rid of the children. He refused, but his wife did not want to listen to him. She cursed and expressed all sorts of reproaches to him. When the parents fell asleep, Hansel, like the last time, wanted to collect stones, but the stepmother locked the door and the boy could not leave the house.
Thank you.
Early in the morning, the children were given a piece of bread each, even less than the previous time. On the way to the forest, Hansel shredded his piece in his pocket and threw the crumbs on the ground. The stepmother took them even further into the forest. Again a big fire was lit, and the father ordered the children to watch the fire while they and their stepmother chopped some more wood. When lunchtime came, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel. And they fell asleep. We woke up when the dark night fell. And then a month came up, and they got together on their way, but they could not find a single crumbs, because thousands of birds fluttering in the forest had long been eating those crumbs. So the children walked for a very long time, but they could not get out of the forest. Suddenly, the road led them to the hut. Coming closer, the children saw that the house was all built of bread and biscuits, and the windows were made of pure sugar. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof, while Gretel went to the window and began gnawing at its windows. And then the door in the hut opened wide, and the old woman came out, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were so scared that they even dropped their tidbits from their hands. And the old woman was kind and invited them to her hut. There was already abundant food on the table: milk, cookies, apples, and nuts. After dinner, the old woman made 2 clean beds for the children, and Hansel and her sister thought they were in heaven. But the old woman only pretended to be affectionate, but in fact she was an evil witch, who built her bread hut for this purpose in order to lure children. Early in the morning, while the children were sleeping, she took Hansel and put him in a small cage. And she ordered her sister to do everything that the wicked witch demanded of her. The old woman decided to fatten the boy in order to eat him later. So Gretel began to cook the most delicious food for Hansel, and she herself got nothing but leftovers. Some time passed, and the boy did not get fat. Then the old woman did not want to wait any longer, and decided to cook and eat Hansel. She ordered Gretel to light the stove and apply water. When the stove warmed up, the old woman ordered her to climb into the stove and see if it was hot enough. So she wanted to push the girl into the fire and bake her. But Gretel knew what was on her mind. She said that she did not know how to get in there, and asked the witch to show herself. The old woman got angry and climbed into the oven. Then Gretel pushed her and slammed the shutter behind the witch. Wow, how terribly the old woman howled then. Gretel, meanwhile, rushed to Hansel and opened the cage. Having freed their brother, they went to the witch's room, in which there were boxes of pearls and precious stones in all corners, filled their pockets with them, and went home. For several days the children were looking for their way back. The forest seemed more and more familiar, and at last they saw their father's house in the distance. How glad he was to see his children alive. Hansel and Gretel poured on the floor all the pearls and gems they had taken from the witch. There was no need to think about food. And they began to live, live, and rejoice. And the father drove the evil stepmother out of the house. A long time ago, in a small kingdom, there lived a king who loved to dress up more than anything else. He could spend whole days in the dressing room, showing off in front of the mirror in new dresses. So, for every occasion of life, whether it be a trip to the theater or just breakfast, the king had prepared the best fabrics and robes. And then one day two swindlers arrived in the kingdom. On the streets of the capital, they heard about a king who loves to dress up. And then a cunning plan ripened in the heads of the deceivers. They decided to pass themselves off as weavers capable of making a wonderful fabric, better than which nothing could be imagined. And so that the king would definitely pay attention to them, the scammers spread a rumor that their fabric had magical properties. It is completely invisible to those who are impenetrably stupid. When the monarch heard about the incredible weavers who appeared in his kingdom, he was very happy. After all, at last he had the opportunity to understand which of the royal advisors and subjects is stupid. The next day, the king summoned the weavers, showered them with gold and ordered him to sew the best dress from magic fabrics and gold threads. Then the deceivers took all the valuable materials, took the gold and set to work. They sat down at the empty royal machines and began to pretend that they were sewing a magic dress for the king. The rumor about the outlandish fabric spread throughout the kingdom, and everyone wanted to see it. The king himself was no exception. He really wanted to take a look at the dress, but he was afraid that he would be stupid and simply would not see the fabric. And so the monarch decided to send his wisest advisor to them, the most intelligent and honest among all.
Oh yeah!
When the old advisor came to the workshop, he saw how the deceivers were working behind empty machines. They lifted up a non-existent dress, straightened invisible folds, and extolled fake designs. Then the counselor, frightened that he would seem a fool, pretended to see the dress too. Returning to the kingdom, the old man did not find the strength to admit that he had not seen anything. Therefore, he reported to the king that the fabric was magnificent. The minister followed the advisor to the weavers. He looked at the empty machines in the same way, and was afraid that he was actually stupid and unworthy of his place.
Oh no!
So the minister went back to the king and praised the fabric even more than the counselor did. Finally, the king decided to admire the curiosity himself, until it was removed from the machine. He came to the weavers with a whole retinue of courtiers. But neither the monarch nor the advisors saw the dress. However, each of them began to admire the outfit, imagining that everyone else was actually seeing the fabric. Satisfied with the result, the king awarded the cunning knights cross and granted them the title of court weavers. And then the day came when you could put on a new outfit. The rogue weavers volunteered to assemble the king themselves. They dressed the ruler in non-existent trousers, then a camisole, and an invisible kaftan. And all the nobility who watched the process only said how beautiful the costume was, and how it went to the king. Finally the monarch went out into the street. The subjects had already gathered around, hoping to see the magnificent attire of the king. However, none of those who came did not admit that they saw nothing. When suddenly a little boy appeared from the crowd and exclaimed that the king was naked. The crowd picked up these words, and everyone around began to laugh at the ruler. The monarch realized that he had been deceived, but continued his march, as befits a king. and his retinue still supported the mantle, which in fact did not exist.